What's up, boys and girls? Lambo here, and in today's video I'm gonna show you guys a nice ZvZ that I played today. So today we're going to do Try Hard Thursday, game of the day. So we're gonna check my vision. This is gonna be from replay instead of first person view because I forgot to put away like donation goals and stuff like that from my stream. So instead I'm gonna go over the replay, which also means that I'm allowed to scroll forward a little bit when nothing is happening. This game was pretty cool because it was a ZvZ, which I don't have that many ZvZs covered on my channel. And on top of that, I started with a 12 pool, and later we're gonna play Roach base versus Muta base. And I think a lot of cool strategic choices are made in this game. So first off, I'm going to 12 pool. I'm making a queen. You don't really want to go queen before hatchery. This is just in case there's a drone. I've had a game against, I'm not sure if it was Bly or someone, who tried to do like a Spinecrawler 12 pool, and then he ended up blocking my hatchery. So just in case, because it doesn't cost anything, I start the queen and then cancel it, and then put down the hatchery. I put down the hatchery after I made the fourth pair of links, because every single attack of the zerglings matters a lot, and it can make the difference between getting the hatchery killed or not. And now this is very crucial. Now the 12 pool begins, and the way you want to micro this is you want to just get as many attacks in on the hatchery as possible, and you kind of want to be in a concave in case the drones come and attack you. And now after we make we basically make 10 links, and then after we're making a drone and an overlord. So 21 overlord it is, and you make the queen when you have the money for it. And now I see the amount of drones he's pulled, and I know this is way too many. So at this moment in time, I go away instead of engaging. Usually your opponents will pull less drones, in which case you should fight here. And then the drones will disengage, and then you go back to hitting the hatch, and then you fight and go back to hitting the hatch. But in this case, my opponent pulled almost all his workers, right? So that means that I want to avoid a fight. And if I just completely avoid a fight, you're already ahead. He's losing too much mining time. This is not a good response. But since I have all of my 8 zerglings here, and I figured that he's not gonna have a perfect surround because of how clamped up he was, I decided to take an engagement. Because if you can actually trade your links for drones, plus the mining time that he loses, it's gonna end up a good trade. It does some decent micro here. We're gonna get 3 drones. And if I backed off now, we would be really far ahead. We killed 3 drones and he lost a ton of mining time. But instead I stayed to fight, get 1 more drone, and then he micros quite nicely. And we actually got 5 drones. So overall we get 5 drones, but we lose all of our zerglings. This is a good trade considering what our opponent has done in his defense. So you can see us already having 3 queens on the way and still being up in minerals, while almost being even in workers. So this is a decent 12 pool. He also didn't start an overlord yet, so yeah, you can see our slight lead here represented in the minerals, but I need to be a little bit careful now. The timing of which I take my gas in ZvZ depends a little bit on what follow-up I want to do, and I usually just always switch that up, more or less. We get an overlord caught, which is not good. In general, I saw that he wasn't getting speed with the zergling scout. In general, if your opponent does not opt to go for early zergling speed, very often they will overmake queens, and then because of it, especially if they're the 12 pool defenders, they will go out on the map and hunt overlords. The reason for that is that good players will realize they have enough larvae. They have enough larvae that they don't actually need the injects. They basically can't spend the larvae, so instead what you can do is you can just run out very far on the map after you're done defending the 12 pool, because obviously your queens can also be out on the map. Your opponent doesn't have the zergling speed, so yeah, you should watch out for those maneuvers as a 12 pool player. I'm gonna lower the sound just a little bit because it's a little bit too high for me. And now we're taking a third. I was pretty sure that he didn't have zergling speed based off my scouting. He wasn't mining any extra gas when I checked, and he didn't mine 100 gas yet, so we're doing this. And now what we're gonna do here is a slight gamble. I think what I usually would do is I would get zergling speed myself, and then play Evo Chamber Roach Warren. In case my opponent would go for like a delayed gas Ling Bane all-in, you can full wall in that scenario. But in case my opponent just goes for a normal link pressure, we just make a lot of links ourselves. Which, in this scenario, our opponent is going for a link pressure of 40 workers. And we overjoined a little bit, or we scouted a little bit too late, so we need to sacrifice the third base, but our opponent got a little bit greedy, so he tried to go forward and actually hit our natural, which was very good for us, because that trade actually ended up around even though we lost some workers. We now are able to defend the base if we want to. Now I was a little bit too far out of position, we end up losing the base. We could have probably defended it, so there was a little bit of an error, and for sure you guys should be thinking the same as me now in this game. I'm thinking, okay, this is most likely gonna be a Spire. And against especially Lingbane Muta, since I didn't know yet if there was a Roach one or not, going for a Queen Drone Roach Nidus is very, very strong. So when I'm scouting, I'm seeing that there is in fact the Spire. What we don't know, which you guys might know if you paid attention to the production tab, is that our opponent is also making Roaches to be safe against a counterattack right now. So he already has 15 Roaches. So a Nidus in this scenario is not good at all. So we're going into something because we're expecting our opponent to play Ling Muta or Lingbane Muta, whereas he's actually going into Roaches himself. So we're leaving approximately 10 Roaches back for the Zerglings to counterattack, and now we're making Spores at the front, and usually you want to creep up slowly. And the entire idea behind this is once you're in front of his base with Spore Crawlers, Ravagers, Queens, he can't do anything anymore. Ravagers zone out Spine Crawlers, Queens and Spore Crawlers completely own Mutas. But now we see the amount of Roaches that he has, and we know we have to go back. I still have some units at home. It's very important to not lose all your economy at home while you're doing this, so leave some units at home. The push at the front is slow anyways, so rather make sure to not lose your economy at first, and then if you actually want to engage, you go for the fight. So now I realize my opponent has Roach Muta himself, right? We're going for a Hydra then, which Roach Hydra is not, and I repeat, is not a viable composition against Lingbane Muta. Against Roach Muta, it is a viable temporary composition. Hydras are not good against Mutas. They're not good because they're terrible against everything else, and their stats are just bad. They also lose against Roaches, against Ravagers. They're just not great units overall. So this is a very specific for this scenario, because I thought my opponent is just making a couple of Mutas and making Roaches, in which case I'm gonna get some Hydras. For now, until I actually scout what other units he's producing, I will just make Roaches to be safe. We're obviously going Burrow Movement to buy some time and to get some pressure ourselves. And so far we only saw a very small amount of Mutas. So the moment your Burrow Movement is done, you should not show your opponent the fact that you have Burrow Movement. So I tried to run away here, but he saw it. The Mutas had enough vision range, so he's getting 2 Overseers. The strongest moment for Tunneling Claws Roaches is always the moment that they pop up in your opponent's base without him even realizing you ever had it. It's a pain to deal with, which in this case, basically the element of surprise is completely gone. So now I'm starting to get some Hydra upgrades, and I'm still kind of expecting him to attack, but now that I see that he's actually committed to more Mutas, I'm throwing in an Infestation Pit. You do need Vipers later on for Mutas, and you do need either Infestors or Lurkers, one of the two, in case of Banelings. Very, very important. What I did there with the Burrow Movement is I checked with one to see if he had detection, and then managed to escape with the rest of them. And now I'm sending a couple of Burrow Movement Roaches across the top side of the map. So I can harass on 2 sides at once. And even though I know my opponent is in position, he's probably also going to be in position in the second spot. If I just go in as he attacks me, then I can probably do some damage. So either when the Mutas are on my side of the map, or when he starts attacking me with his Roach Ravager Force. Little talk about my upgrades in this game. I went +1 first, very standard on Missile. And then, see here, I sent 1 Roach in first. And then the second upgrade I got, actually, was Armor, which is a lot better against Mutas. Armor Roaches survive longer against Mutas. Armor in Roach versus Roach fights is just as good as +2. And Armor, on top of that, +2, especially against Lingbane Muta, doesn't do anything unless they have armor themselves, which I clicked this unit, they didn't have armor. So that's why I'm doing this. You also gradually want to start adding more spore crawlers in crucial positions once you recognize that your opponent is going for a mass Muta. His roaches are just focus firing, and that's fine. We check that the resource lost is still relatively even, but I saw my drone count of my opponent was very low. So do not even think about attacking in these scenarios. Attacking into Muta players in general is probably the worst decision you can make in 80% of the cases, unless it's an actual all-in. A pre-planned all-in. So yeah, the entire strategy at this point is to just go up to Hive and Vipers, and then try to buy time with the Roach counterattacks. The reason I don't have a Lurker done yet is because I knew my opponent doesn't have a baiting nest. I scouted pretty much everything, all of his bases, and I knew he doesn't have a baiting nest. Whereas in a normal game, you rush the Lurker them ASAP. It's very important against, especially Lingbane Muta, but since I know he doesn't have a baiting nest, I don't really need Lurkers, and I'm fine with just standing here defensively, trying to defend my bases. Drone count is around 60. Could have been slightly higher, but I thought at any moment my opponent would attack me, which I think he probably should have as well. So I think staying on a lower drone count just to be safe against especially Roach Ravager Muta, which is a relatively committed composition since it doesn't transition well into the late game, is a good idea. And now that I know we're safe, we have superior upgrades. I clicked his units as well, which had, I think, 0-0. Yeah, I clicked his Roach Ravager and they had 0-0 upgrades. So I started being very, very confident, adding some more drones, adding some Vipers, just going into the late game. And I still do not see a single reason for me to attack, even though we probably could. We probably could just, with the army that we have, run across the map and kill him. We have 19 Roaches, 6 Ravagers versus 12 Roaches, 9 Ravagers, and we have 20 Hydras versus 26 Mutas, which the Hydras obviously are going to win, especially with 2-1 upgrades at this point in the game. But since I saw my opponent is not mining from his fort base, and I am, there's no reason for me to attack, because I'm just getting further ahead by waiting and transitioning into the late game. So we're going into the Lurker then. We're getting Hydra range. All of those upgrades, I usually, especially in those kind of games, you don't want to start the Hydra upgrades until you actually are sure you do need to go into the Hydras, although my Hydra range is a little bit late in this scenario. And yeah, our main Muta defense is Spores and Queens, and then the other army, we're just trying to anticipate where he's coming from. The hardest part about playing against Muta is always being in position for the ground attacks, not so much the Mutas themselves, because the Mutas clear up the Overlords and Division. So now I should also be starting to get Overlord speed and start restarting Overlords, because I have the money for doing so. Also starting +3. With the money that I have, probably I should also start a second Evolution Chamber. Yeah, all of this is obviously not the greatest trades for him. But he needs to lose those Mutas, otherwise his army will be not very valuable.
Metamorphosis complete. Mineral field depleted.
Try to always split the parasitic bombs as well. One parasitic bomb doesn't one-shot a Muta because the Muta regenerates. So you want to split them up a little bit so that you have the potential of killing more Mutas. Then if you all put them at the exact same time, chances are all the Mutas are gonna survive with 1 HP. So make sure to mistime them a little bit so that don't sync them up entirely. And yeah, at this point we can probably start doing stuff, but since our opponent is still very aggressive with the Mutas, we gotta watch out. We kind of lose our Vipers here, so I'm remaking them. At this point in the game we could just attack and we're still very far ahead. I'm gonna zoom forward a little bit into when some late game action actually happens. So yeah, if you're ahead in ZvZ, the easiest thing for you to do is to split your army. And because if you're ahead, all you need to do is you need to trade. Is if you split your army and just put more units towards one spot, it's going to be very, very hard for your opponent to also split. And trade efficiently if you have the better army yourself. That might be just more army supply, it could also be just a better army with better upgrades or higher tech army, any of that. So at this point we're just trying to trade, and you're gonna see that our resource loss they're gonna be better and better and better the longer this game goes on. That's why I also didn't want to attack. I felt very confident in playing a late game in this scenario. And also another cute little trick that I think you guys should also copy is that in my run by army, I always try to have all the Ravagers, because this makes borrowing the lurkers in your main army a lot easier. So if I can show you this right now. If I select these units, I can unborrow and borrow the lurkers. So if I just want to borrow like one lurker, let's say I have 10 lurkers, right? I only want to borrow these two, there's 8 here. I only want to borrow these two. I just select this when the Vipers are not above them. And then I just press borrow. Whoops. Whereas if Ravagers are there, I would need to select and then press shift and then borrow to borrow specific lurkers, which is a lot harder. So the Ravagers usually want to be in the run-by squad, as well as they're actually decent run-by units, especially if your opponent also has lurkers. They can corrosive bile, force them to move, and then try to kill some as they reborrow. So now I just wanted to get rid of the Ravagers, so I take an engagement there. And I'm not sure why he uses parasitic bombs on Vipers. Don't do that. Abduct is a lot better. Unless your opponent has 10 Vipers for some reason and you have just a couple. So yeah, I'm just going for the secure kills, and I killed a lot of Vipers here. This was a very efficient trade. This down here was not as efficient, so wait, we can take a look at just the abducts. So at this point we're 4k ahead. This is the thing that doesn't trade well because I lose my overseer actually. It dies to corrosive bile, I think. Yeah. So this trade down here is not perfect. But these trades up here are great. This is 300 resources. 600, 900, 1.2k, just like that. That's 1.2k resources, 4 units abducted. So always try to go for the abducts with your Vipers. And if you have Vipers, make sure that they're not too far ahead of the Hydras, because if you abduct your opponent's Vipers, it can be that he uses Blinding Cloud on the Vipers, and then usually what you want to do is you hold position and his Vipers still die. But that only works if you abduct his Vipers directly above your Hydras. So make sure to have the Vipers not too far forward, otherwise they will get abducted while you abduct theirs and you might not kill their Vipers. At this point I'm smelling blood in the water pretty much, and I looked at my bank and I saw I had a juicy gas bank to work with. So I'm upgrading my army with 16 lurkers to kind of finish the game. If you go into mass lurker, it will enable you to split your army up a lot easier, because you can never push into this many lurkers. So either you can split up the amount of lurkers that you have, or you can go for a big army in one place and then gain the position with the lurkers somewhere else, right? This is usually what you should do. So now we're defending this run by, and at the same time we unborrowed. On top of the lurkers, killed some lurkers, went back. I remembered I had a Nidus from early and just used it as a distraction. Even just using it once, even though I don't have any units in here, forces him to leave supply there, which is a good trade. Especially if you're rich. Forcing your opponent to pre-split his army, even if you're not actually thinking about using it, is always good. That's also why it's good to just have a War Prison chilling here, because I need like 5 Hydras here and 5 Hydras here if I want to defend these bases. And it doesn't really cost supply. The War Prison costs 2 supply, the Nidus literally costs no supply, so just reminding him that the fact that there is actually a Nidus is good, I think. And yeah, your vision always should be ahead of your army when you're trying to look for abducts. And the priority with abducts should be Vipers first, then lurkers, and so on and so forth. So now we're trying to get him out of position with a lurker run by, Roach run by at the same time. And now that we got in between his bases... Now that we get in between his bases, he does a last-ditch counterattack. So I just take all my reinforcements plus most of my lurkers back home, make sure and defend that. That's an army split reactively. Like all of these splits I'm doing with just selecting these units and then pressing Alt. So for example, let's take a look at how my hotkeys work during this. This is my 1 hotkey, right? This is hotkey number 8, and the Vipers and Overseers are 2. And at the moment I realize he's gonna go for a counterattack, I select these lurkers and press Alt 8. Alt 8 makes it so that they're not in the 1 hotkey anymore and they're now in the 8 hotkey. And on top of that I will press 1. I press 1 and then I control click the X and I also press Alt 8. So now in the 8 hotkey I have all the units that are in production plus these lurkers. And then I move back with the Vipers themselves. What matters so much in very high level ZvZ is how fast and how precise you can split your army perfectly, especially in late game. So knowing how to do that properly and taking your time to do it properly, and eventually getting faster at it is very important. But that unit steal hotkey is super, super important. So I recognize that even if I just leave this little units behind, he can't do anything. I noticed that I don't have an overseer now with this army, so I split another overseer off. So I pressed 2, and then I selected one of the overseers, and I pressed Alt 1, so or Alt Shift 1 rather. So now I have this overseer that came from the 2 hotkey to my 1 hotkey, whereas my 1 hotkey, these lurkers were previously in the 1 hotkey, they're now in the 8 hotkey together with these reinforcements. So like everything just shifts around a little bit in a couple of seconds. Long story short, we kill him and defend at the same time. And he's dead. So yeah, I just thought that was a cool ZvZ. Because it shows how to play against Roach Muta, really, with a big Muta commitment, which I don't see every day, but maybe you guys see that kind of stuff all the time. So just to summarize, against Roach Muta, mostly play Queen Roach with a Hydra then ready. You can also already make a Lurker then if you want, especially if you think there's a chance that they're transitioning into Banelings. But you can't just stay on Roach Queen Ravager for most of it with a couple of Hydras, and then eventually you want to go into Infestation Pit transition with Hive and into late game. Because your opponent's investing a lot of money into units that are not that strong in fighting, so you kind of want to pre-split your army a little bit, get up a 4th base, go 8 gas, go Hive. Against Banelings, you want to rush Lurkers or Infestors, one of the two, but this was not Ling Bane Muta, so this is a different story. Then the late game itself, for another thing, I guess, is you go +1 carapace after +1 missile, usually against Muta. Pretty much always, in all of the cases, unless your opponent already has +1 carapace zerglings. Another thing, Roach Burrow movement really helps against Muta to keep his units at home. Ling Bane is not great at clearing Roach Burrow movement counterattacks, and things can get very chaotic. Let's say he's actually playing Ling Bane Muta, and I have my 8 Roaches in the main, and then I have these 4 Roaches that I borrowed like this coming in here. His Zerglings will take quite a while to clear this up, and he might even split his units, but the moment he also then commits with the Mutas, I can run across the map with the rest of my Roaches. And then it's going to be a big pain for him to clear up without losing all his economy, basically. So in general, Roach Burrow movement kind of enables you, if you have the money for it, it enables you to force him to have the Mutas on his side of the map not harassing, right? Which helps you with your defense, even though I guess it's the saying offense is the best defense. So I thought those were pretty cool. Then showing why Parasitic Bomb in Viper vs Viper fights is not preferred. Abducts are better, like that fight right here was a good example for it. Don't try to get Parasitic Bombs off, just abduct their Vipers while hold positioning your Hydras. And other than that, I guess it also was a 12 pull, which I'm not sure I've shown yet, a ZvZ 12 pull, even though it was not the perfect execution. If you guys see this many drones pulled, just run away until you actually have 10 Zerglings, and they don't have any, then you can try to just make sure they're not mining. Like, just always hit the hatchery, and then if they're coming towards you, Zerglings go away again, and so on and so forth. But if they pull basically all drones but maybe 2 or 3, then always just try to avoid the fight. I guess that's another thing you guys can learn from this. Okay, I hope this was helpful. And yeah, I had a lot of fun today. Today's stream was awesome. It's like 14-0 or something we went. So I hope if you guys want to catch this, make sure to tune in to twitch.tv/LamboKing in case you guys are not aware. If you guys want to support me with money, I don't have a Patreon or anything like that. You can also make sure to subscribe to me on Twitch. That would be the biggest support, like an actual paid subscription. I still need like 100+ paid subscriptions to get to that 500+ mark where I could get the better deal, so that would be awesome. If you don't want to pay anything, that's also fine. You can subscribe on YouTube or just click my stuff. Leave some comments, leave a like, all that kind of stuff is support enough. Anyways, love you guys and see you in the next video. Bye bye.